Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the vice chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum, and I'm laughing because this is the most amused I've seen him in a long time. The deal was I would wear the hat. This is one of the most over-the-top hats I think you've ever put me into. I really do, Greg. I think it is. So I am your donut today. I have no idea what it has to do with the airplane. Today we are going to be covering the F-22, which is a follow-on airplane to the F-117. But first, my epigrammatic assistant, I need to get this off. This is going to be interesting. Let's see. It came off actually pretty easy. All right, off camera there we go. All right, so we're going to do the F-22 today, and this airplane is really the follow-on to the F-117. You can argue with me, but a lot of what went into the F-117 and the switch over of really, we weaponized stealth, right, with the F-117, but then making the airplane lethal in the air was kind of the next step with this airplane. Now, this aircraft was built primarily by Lockheed. Boeing did some of the avionics and the systems in it, so it has a kind of a mixed lineage there. I'm going to go ahead and give you a plan view. Now, when I talk about the follow-on to stealth, and Greg can throw up a stealth fighter, but you can kind of see the shape. And what they were doing with this airplane in the design phase was they were playing with these facets. They wanted to keep the stealth, and so the angle of attack and the angles on these are what they derived out of stealth, the placement of the fins, the nacelles. Of course, we have thrust vectoring technology in this. Really big horizontal paddles for maneuverability. If you have not seen one of these flying, I encourage you to do that. It is an absolutely amazing airplane. This is a fifth generation fighter. I'm going to explain what fifth generation means because in my view, it is not what you think, Greg. I'm going to depart, and again, you can argue with me. Internal weapons bays, you can get AMRAAMs in there. There are side bays for air-to-air missiles. It has a gun. Remember, we have put a gun on every airplane since we started with the F-4. The aircraft first flight was in 1997. If you can believe it, doesn't seem like that long ago. The intro was in 2005. It was produced from 1996, so for the prototype, obviously, to 2011. There were 195 built, 8 test aircraft, and 187 combat airplanes. Now we're going to explain what that means. This program was originally started in 1981 by the United States Air Force, and the reason for that is they wanted to replace the F-15 and the F-16. We're sticking with Senior Prom and Senior all this stuff in the code names. This was Senior Sky. It was to counter a lot of airplanes that are in the news today in the war in Ukraine, the Su-27 and the MiG-29. So it was to give us a leg up. The test aircraft was the YF-22. It had a fly-off against the YF-23. There are a lot of arguments about what was a better airplane to this day, and I can see where some of those arguments lie. The YF-23 was a good airplane. Lockheed was eventually selected to build the aircraft. Now, when I talk about it is very stealthy, it also is very stealthy in electronic emissions. It is very fast. This aircraft is a Mach 2.5 airplane, or 1,500 miles an hour. So it is comparable to those high-end fighters. The difference in this is this has a cruise ability, what they call super cruise, that it can fly at Mach 1.82 or 1,220 miles per hour. It has this super cruise capability that the other, the fourth generation fighters didn't have. In other words, you get, and this is, by the way, all at altitude, but you can get up at altitude and this airplane can kind of cruise along. It's slick enough that it can move around, save a little fuel. It is very stealthy. Now, why is it a 5th generation fighter, Greg? I know you're asking yourself that question after you made me wear that ridiculous donut helmet. The reason for that is, and this is why I am going to say it's a 5th generation fighter. You can argue that the technology is the thrust vectoring and all of that stuff, the way the aircraft was built, but there is a term, Greg, called the unblinking eye. And what is the unblinking eye? Well, the unblinking eye is the total integration of sensors and battlefield technology into these platforms so that you get nearly instantaneous data upgrades. It has really gone into the overdrive with the F-35, which we are going to do a segment on, but the F-22 is really that next step. Remember, when we talk about the stealth fighter, the F-117A, the F-117 was stealthy, you couldn't see it. Remember, it had the radar cross-section of a small bird, and that's going to become important in a moment. I'll explain why. It had it could carry a wide range of bombs, but let's say 2,000-pound bunker busters in the Gulf War. It could go after high-value targets, but that pilot, he was flying around and he was on his own. He couldn't communicate. When the airplane locked down into stealth mode, he was on his own. He didn't know who anybody else was up there. If the rest of the flight of the stealths were being shot to pieces, he didn't know that. He couldn't be warned because he was totally stealthy, no emissions whatsoever. If there were adversary airplanes up there, he was up there by himself. When you get into this unblinking eye, which is sensor fusion, all of the combat sensors and everything are being fed into the data stream, and this pilot is getting instantaneous updates, combat updates. That could be from drones, it could be from radar, it could be satellite technology, it could be rivet joint aircraft, it could be AWACS. All of that comes together. Now, it's extremely difficult to manage this information, and I'm going to explain that in a minute too. But this was the first true step into what I would call data fusion, so that you're getting all of that data coming together that makes a very lethal package. Now, not only is the airplane is incredibly maneuverable, as I talked about, but when you start mating it up with this fusion of data so that you have complete combat awareness, and I talked about the airplane's radar cross-section. What do you think this one is? Remember, stealth is of a little tiny bird, like a sparrow. This one is a radar cross-section of a steel marble. So we've learned what we could with stealth. We've learned how we can facet the shape. Now we're going to refine all this stuff to be able to be more survivable on the battlefield and be more lethal. Now, when I talk about lethality, and Ukraine, I never thought that I would see a war like what's going on in Ukraine in my lifetime. I mean, this is pretty much, with the exception of nuclear weapons, we're seeing Russians use everything in the arsenal. Cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles, heavy artillery, armor, all of that stuff. But what I would tell you is two things. One, the Ukrainians have denied the Russians the ability to have air superiority. And why is that? That is because they don't have aircraft that are effective at defeating the Ukrainian countermeasures and anti-aircraft equipment. And this is the type of airplane that is designed, or stealth to begin, this is the type of airplane that was designed to actually defeat that measures. Now, it's surprising when you look at what the Russians have in their inventory that they are not able to do this. And I don't understand. There's a lot of people, hindsight will always be 2020. When this is over, and hopefully it's over very soon, historians will be able to look back and understand why the Russians, with technically a lot of 5th generation weapons and aircraft, haven't been able to manage data fusion. So, and what happens Now let's flip the script. When you get to like the Ukrainians, which are able to manage the information coming from the front lines and then bring that to bear at a specific point or a specific point in the air, which is what's causing the Russians so high losses, that is when things get really lethal. That is where these types of aircraft, and I've talked about in segments before, lethality. In other words, the sheer consumption of equipment that will happen in a modern war. When you get a peer-to-peer adversary, we clearly know the Russians have got some issues now, and I'm not even sure if you could count them a peer state adversary at this point, because these aircraft would destroy them, just utterly destroy them. But what's happening with the Chinese, they very well could be a peer-to-peer adversary. They may not be that hollow suit of armor that we're dealing with the Russians right now. The Russians are being heavily embarrassed by their modern weapons use and their lack of integration, and lack of data fusion. But if these aircraft run into counterparts that are as sophisticated, the consumption, the destruction, and the lethality of these systems will be unlike anything we've ever seen. At least in the Russian conflict with Ukraine, there is a survivability component. What I mean by that, somebody can miss. A missile can miss, an artillery shell can miss. With these types of systems, with these automated systems, they don't miss. And I'm going to tell you just one mismatch, although it ended up not costing anybody their lives. I am going to tell you about one that I know of, that I've verified, of a F-22 running into a really a late third, or I would maybe fourth generation fighter and an upgrade, and you can argue with me that in a minute. But first, let me get to my toast. And my toast today is going to be for those very rare 187 F-22 drivers, or maybe give or take a little bit. If you are flying the F-22 right now, and yeah, I'm talking to you in the video, if you're watching the video and you're a Raptor driver, an F-22 driver, you are probably flying the most dangerous, lethal airplane on the planet, and you are I would say, based on everything right now we know, probably the top of the food chain, hence Raptor. Would that work, Greg? I think it would. You're the top of the food chain when it comes to fighter technology. It's not easy to get there. These airplanes are very sophisticated. They actually took a run at producing more of them in the mid-2000s after they realized that maybe there was going to be more of a threat. They were too expensive to restart the tooling. But if you're a Raptor driver, not only are you the most lethal driver on the planet as far as aircraft, but you are also an endangered species. You like how I turned that in there? So to all you Raptor drivers out there, I salute you. And what did Greg do today? This is a low calorie, 140 calorie per bottle. This is a naturally flavored apple soda. It's kind of interesting. I don't see sugars. There's California Redemption, which means this, you didn't get this off of. I always like to see that because that means it hasn't been sitting for like 10 years. I know. So, oh, there's even I can't read it, but there's a sell-by date on this. So hopefully it's not gone to the wind. Oh, that's nice. Greg, what are you doing? Jason actually gave me one that was nice. Yeah, he's shaking his head. Greg, that's not bad. So that's two in a row. I don't know. You guys are slipping between you and Jason. So this aircraft is less reliant on RAM technology, the radar absorbent material, more reliant on facets. It doesn't have, the F-117 was difficult to maintain, the RAM was difficult to maintain. This is an improved coating on the airplane, and they were more dependent on the facets. Now let me tell you a little story. I thought this story was complete baloney when I heard it because it sounds like out of a movie. But there was, and some of you may have read about it, but there was an Iranian F-4 that was up, F-4 Phantom, that was up trying to shoot down an American drone, probably a Global Hawk reconnaissance airplane, and he was angling to get a missile shot at it. There happened to be a couple of F-22s that were up on a combat air patrol. They literally got up underneath. Now think about this for a minute. Iranian and Soviet and a lot of foreign air forces are very dependent on command control. In other words, the ground command will vector them in, and what I mean by that is steer them towards the target, and then they have to ask for permission to fire, and so on and so forth. They're very dependent on ground control. So the first thing is the Iranian radars never saw the F-22s because they would have warned them. The F-22s got up under the F-4, the F-4s, and got up on the guard channel, a common radio channel, and told the F-4s, the Iranian F-4s, their complete loadout, all the missiles on the airplane, on both airplanes, what they had and everything, and said it was time to go home. Which case, if you have an F-22 at your 6 o'clock low position that's in, I'll use a Top Gun term, perfect firing position because we're coming up on Top Gun. But if you've got one of these guys sitting on your 6 behind you, and he's telling you what your loadout is, it is time to go home because you're only going to go home two ways. You're either going to fly home or you're going to parachute to your home, but you're not going to get the shot. And the Iranian F-4s went home. I thought that was total BS. It sounds like a movie. But I ran into an Air Force officer who will not be named, who dissuaded me, that was in the theater at the time, and that actually happened. That is the difference between a 4th generation aircraft and what I talk about being lethal and a 5th generation airplane, especially an offensive aircraft like this. The 4th generation fighters just don't stand a chance. And that's why in Ukraine, a lot of folks felt that the later model Sukhois would have easily been able to take on the MiG-29s. But for whatever reason, the Ukrainians with older air defense systems and older airplanes have been able to shoot down, I think this morning I saw 200, they're claiming 200 Russian aircraft and about 165 helicopters. So a lot of aerial kills. Now, this aircraft, as I mentioned, life expectancy is it will eventually, it's going to go through, they've gone through a number of block upgrades because they're so rare. This is an air dominance airplane. This is an air dominance fighter. They're so rare they keep upgrading them, but there's not a lot of them. And if a shooting war ever started, they would want to be very careful how they committed these. They're in the process of building a whole bunch more F-35s, which is the next step, and we're going to cover it, the next step in that whole data fusion and battlefield management standpoint or combination. But the one thing about all these airplanes and what we're finding out is that they are incredibly expensive. So you saw the Air Force, and we did a story on the F-15, or one of our stories, and we talked about the F-15 being turned into a missile truck. Only about a month or so ago, the Air Force said they were going to cut down on that. I think the reason that is, and again, this is just my opinion, is that they're headed to they've already flying a 6th generation fighter, and they're keeping their cards close because they're going to start producing a 6th generation aircraft. The Air Force has already said that a prototype is flying, although nobody has ever seen one. There was a follow-on airplane, and we'll do a segment on it, called the X-44, the Manta. And that may be something like what they're flying, but so far, and I keep being vigilant, I have not seen what that airplane is. So the F-22 is not only groundbreaking, it is operational, and it has already realistically seen the end of its life, which, if you can think about that, that is amazing, that eventually these airplanes will be retired, really solely due to cost. They're just so expensive. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have to spend $10 billion, Greg, to have your own F-22. If you want one of these, you can click on the link that's with this video, and we will gladly send you one. And you can make jet noises and fly around and sneak up. You know, the new Top Gun movies, although this is a Air Force airplane, you can sneak up on those bad guys and keep the world safe from our adversaries. This is really cool. If you've got a kid in the house that likes to build stuff, you can actually, it's not too difficult. You can build one of these, but if you click on the link, please, Jason will send you one. Now, we cannot do what we do. I'm standing in the F-117 exhibit hall. We cannot do that without your donations and restore these airplanes. If you see the link on this video, please click on the link, donate a few bucks. If you have $1 billion, we'll be happy to do that. We get ourselves an F-22. But yeah, we can always use your donations. Now, if you came across this page on YouTube or this video on YouTube, all we do is talk about military aviation. We are long form videos, so we're not popular where I'm dancing around for 2.5 seconds on TikTok. We don't do that. We talk about military airplanes. They are long form videos, but that's what we do. If you like that, I would ask that you subscribe. Send us to a friend. We could surely use the subscription. If you came across us on Facebook, give us a like. Also, send us your comments. We really like the comments when they come in. We're going to be coming up on our 3,000th subscriber, and you're going to need to keep an eye out because we're going to have like a contest going on. That's pretty cool. You get yourself some cool swag in the deal. So that will be fun. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.